could not see any survivors at the time, okay? It's really like nothing I've ever seen or been prepared for, and, you know, I would have never, ever expected anything of this magnitude.
We had 2 physicians with us, 2 PAs, and 6 RNs. And we went in and have been up there for several hours. There is no one that was available for us to triage because they're not taking them out at this point. They can't find anybody that's alive. Like Nikki said, one person did come out that was alive, but everyone else is dead, and we're talking women, men, and children. And this is pretty pathetic that someone would blow up some innocent children.
We still have a lot of people unaccounted for, and I know that a lot of employers were asking that any individuals who might have been in the building who had not checked in yet with someone, please do so. Call the Red Cross, let them know where you are and that you are fine, because they are trying to get those final counts in to let us know. They do want to count for each and every person who was in that building.
I think the most telling way really for us to try and tell this story, because I know most of us here have exhausted any adjectives that we might have had to describe what's happened today, continues to be through the sounds and the pictures of what happened today.
Can I get through to see how she's doing?
No.
Please. No?
There's nobody. They're not letting anybody pass right here, okay? I'm sorry. It's too dangerous in that area, and we're not letting anybody in. If
Are they evacuating people?
That's what we're trying to do right here. We're trying to get the more serious out. Unless they're injured are being worked on by area personnel right here. You can wait right over here out of the middle of the street. Folks stand out of the street like these people in.
Why don't we try and clear you off this place where you can sit down, okay? You guys doing all right? We can sit. We're trying. We're going to be all right.
Get all of our people down that way.
That way?
Yeah.
Okay. We got everybody out of the second floor.
Okay, I got everybody. No, everyone go this way. Get everybody moving up there, okay?
It's on its way. It's just a real busy moment right now. So as soon as we can get you an ambulance here, we're going to have you in here, all right?
Got one here! Hey, down here! Out of the way. Move it back, folks. He's from the daycare to YMC, I guess. Move it back.
Where was that?
Again, that was coverage of the Oklahoma City explosion from NBC affiliate KFOR-TV, and there is more Nightside ahead. Stay with us.
On the reaction in the Middle East today.
From Iraq to Iran, from Cairo to Beirut, there was sharp condemnation and denials of responsibility from groups often associated with terrorism. In Lebanon, a spokesman for the Iranian-backed Hezbollah said, "We are only interested in liberating our land from the Israeli occupation. We have no relation with the explosion inside the United States." In Gaza, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which have been quick to claim responsibility for suicide bombings against Israel, were quick to deny any for the one in Oklahoma.
We are not sure that Hamas has no any role in this process.
Many Palestinians worry they will automatically be blamed. Every time there's an attack, he says, people always try to connect it to the Palestinians.
It's just crucifixion war against Islam.
PLO leader Yasser Arafat condemned the attack as cowardly, as did Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. In Israel, many people said they understood from first-hand experience how Americans feel.
It's terrible, this terrorism, but we suffer from it every day.
Now I think they will be they understand better the thing that we are sharing in Israel.
Only Iran suggested suspects, American suspects.
It has been said that an extremist Christian group stationed in Idaho and Oklahoma states are suspected of the terrorist move.
The most distinguishing feature concerning today's reaction was the almost total absence of any hostility or criticism of the U.S. by its enemies, the absence of any support for the bombing by those who have waged or supported terrorism in the past. Don Cladstrup, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
We want to help. We want to reach out and try to minister to people and do whatever we can.
Both of these men should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. Citizens should not, therefore, attempt to take any action against these men.
You know, he was playing and he just blinked, and when he opened up his eyes, he was in heaven. He just went just like that, you know.
A day of grieving turned into a day of hope.
It was a day of hope for missing victims, for their rescuers, and for the worldwide search that continues for answers. Here is the latest that we have on the bombing now. Mike Gautreaux, among others, has done just a yeoman's job of keeping us informed of the search and rescue efforts. And Mike joins us now live from very close to the scene of the explosion. Michael?
Jennifer, we've been on the north side of the building with most of the media, and in fact today we're going to take a look at some of the best pictures of this destruction that you've seen to date so far. We can roll videotape. Officials here let a camera get very close to the building, and you'll see a close-up view. Here we are of the firefighters and some of the FEMA workers as the rescue effort continues in the second day of this. It's hard to get a feel for as far back as we are of just how much destruction there is, and when you take a close-up look like this, you get a better idea of just what they're having to deal with. Huge chunks of concrete, bigger than cars. We've seen some sparks and smoke throughout the day, and what they're having to do is use gas-powered cement saws to cut these huge chunks of building into small workable sizes so that they can move those out of the way. We also got a first look at this. That red and blue tarp is the scene of the crater where they believe that Ryder truck was parked and where the detonation first took place. I'm told that crater is probably 30 feet across and some 15 feet deep down through the concrete of the street. Much of the work by hand, as you see firefighters there, as they dig through the reinforced steel. A lot of the cranes here are being used to hoist these huge pieces of concrete out of the way. Firefighters then come in and dig away the smaller pieces. Most of today's efforts have been centered on the front of the building. I know Jack showed you a view of that elevator. It looks like they're trying to get installed over on the west side. But as far as the rescue efforts are concerned, I believe they have put most of their effort into that bottom floor. We did not see any video in any pictures in the video I just showed you, but they have begun putting arrows and X's to mark the spots where they had found bodies today. Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Mike. And the pictures, you know, of the children who were injured and killed in yesterday's explosion, it's certainly stuck in all of our minds. But what about their families, the people who were left behind? Reporter Rhonda Chapman today talked with a single mother who has lost her son in that explosion. You see, the young boy was one of the children who was staying at the daycare inside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building.
I just think this can't be happening to me. What's your wonderful? This can't be happening to me. He's just 3. Clark said at least he didn't suffer. You know, he was playing and he just blinked, and when he opened up his eyes, he was in heaven. He just went just like that, you know.
Alicia Chavez's little boy is dead.
We're here for you. Thank you.
Her family and friends listen.
I mean, I can't imagine going through what you're going through. How do you describe it?
You know, your child is taken away from you, and just a second, you know. You just take him to daycare and thinking that he's going to be okay and go to work, and not but an hour that you're there, you know, you hear this big boom. And
Alicia had just dropped her son Zachary off at daycare, told him she loved him when she felt the explosion.
You know, I just remember him, you know, bending down and playing with a toy, you know. And I just remember seeing that, and that's just the last time I seen him, and left, and that's all.
Later, all Alicia could do was hope and wait that her son would be okay. But shortly after 5, she found out he wasn't. Rescue crews pulled his little body from the wreckage.
He really loved me, and I really loved him too. And he's just all I had.
Rhonda Chapman, 5 News.
Let's go now to Cindy Morrison and Sean Kimmerling out on the front lawn. Cindy?
There have been a lot of volunteers across the metro coming out of the woodwork, and I got to talk with some of the volunteers today, and I'll tell you, it was a very humbling experience. The centers are off limits to the media today, but there's no secret of the good deeds here.
I've seen volunteers go over and comfort them, put their arms around those people, give them the kind of support that you might expect from a family member.
Linda Harris even wanders the area giving ribbons.
Because turquoise blue, because of the Indian color of turquoise, it's a very protective and spiritual color for the Indians.
The tremendous outpouring from Oklahomans has even caught the attention of Elizabeth Dole.
People were, about 800 people were out at the Red Cross chapter yesterday wanting to volunteer. I was told, though I wasn't here, but I was told people just pour it out. The phone, in fact, the phones have been so clogged, people wanting to help.
And they are definitely helping, doing just what those in need the most.
People years down the road, they will not remember what you said to them. They won't remember a single word, but they will remember that you were there and that you cared for them and that you cried with them or that you held them or served them food.
Cindy Wall Morrison, 5 News.
School counselors in the Oklahoma City school system are now currently all on standby. Counselors are being temporarily transferred to the schools most in need. Many students spent the day making cards for rescue teams and the victims and talking to counselors about their fears and worries. For 5th grader Tyler Clanahan, it just doesn't seem fair.
Well, I think it's really stupid that someone would do something like this because it's killing innocent people. It's not fair.
Other children, like Riley Hancock, are feeling angry.
Let me at them. Let me at them.
Well, school officials say offers of help have come from school districts across the country. Madeline Cunin, Deputy Secretary of Education, has offered federal crisis counseling assistance. And that was their news, a report from station KOCO in Oklahoma City.
And you're watching.
I understand that we've got the tape now. I'm sorry? WJVK, I apologize, is our station that's participating in all of this, and we should have some pictures from them to see the farmhouse where this activity is ongoing. There you see the farmhouse right now. This is where 2 individuals, we believe 2, maybe more, were being sought. We do not have, and we should emphasize this and cannot emphasize it enough, definitive information about who all these people are, about which, if any, groups they are associated with beyond what we have been told by our sources. You heard the President, the Attorney General, and the Director of the FBI say very emphatically that the investigation is ongoing, that much is yet unknown, and that they, in particular, must see many more pieces fall into place before they will be prepared to speak definitively about who or what are involved. Agents are on site at this building, we are told. We will be back.
Massed outside a farmhouse in Decker, Michigan, about an hour north of Detroit. That's a farmhouse said to be owned by 2 brothers with possible links to the bombing. They are identified as James Douglas Nichols and Terry Lynn Nichols. Law enforcement sources say those 2 men and McVeigh were expelled from a paramilitary group for being too radical. Officials are refusing to speculate on what motive any of these suspects might have. President Clinton spoke about a half hour ago about these latest breaking developments. He said there is still much to learn and once again cautioned against premature speculation.
I have never, and the Justice Department has never said that it was a foreign threat. But the most important thing that you understand is that even though this is a positive development, this investigation has a lot of work still to be done in it. And therefore it would be wrong to draw any conclusions. There have been lots of twists and turns in this investigation, but I would say to the American people, we should not assume, as I said yesterday, that we should not assume that any people from beyond our borders are involved in it. We should not assume anything except what we know.
The Justice Department says a Jordanian-American man described as a possible witness to the bombing has been released. He was flown back to the U.S. yesterday from London for questioning, and sources tell CNN he was very cooperative. He's no longer considered a suspect or a witness. Instead of going back to Europe, in fact, he's going to Oklahoma City himself voluntarily. Rescue crew...
Dilapidated garage or farm building or shed of some sort. They go back and forth between there and seem to be searching around. Not in any great hurry, I might add, either. They're sauntering, if anything. There doesn't seem to be any urgency in their actions, but they are looking, as said Sheriff Strickler, they're looking for some type of evidence in this house.
Ed, the pictures that we're seeing, the aerial pictures that we're seeing, show this as a farmhouse in wide open, what would appear to be very rural country. Can you tell us a little bit about the area of Decker, Michigan?
Yes, this is thumb country, they call it here in Michigan. If you held up your right hand, it would probably be at about the first knuckle of your thumb, just where it bends. It's extremely rural. They grow a lot of celery up here. It's apple country. Very, very agricultural company. That some people think it's the forgotten side of Michigan, but it is all very flat, wide open spaces, about 65 miles north of Detroit.
65 miles north of Detroit. Are you familiar with any kind of, we have heard suggestions of some kind of Michigan military type of connection. You're based in Detroit. Have you heard of any such things in the past?
We have heard certainly of the group known as the Michigan Militia, which is a paramilitary group. Their tenets include getting government out of our lives. They also want the United States to get out of the UN. Because they think that the UN is simply doing no good. As we reported before, we spoke to the head of the group a couple hours ago, Ken Adams, who said that his group should not be construed as an anti-government group, but more of a pro-government group. They just don't want so much government in citizens' lives. They do have paramilitary activities. They had quite a demonstration at the state capitol a few months ago. They dress up in the military garb, but they say that they are paramilitary, but they are not militant.
Okay, Ed Garston, thanks very much. We will be back to you monitoring events there, very telling events, perhaps. And as things become clearer, we will, of course, be going back. Now to Perry, Oklahoma, where the suspect is under arrest. Greg Lamont is there outside the courthouse. Greg?
Well, Perry, Oklahoma is about 50 miles north of Oklahoma City. Population here about 6,000. We're told the main industry here is a company called Ditch Witch, which makes digging equipment. As we understand it, 27-year-old Tim McVeigh was arrested for speeding on a local highway here in Perry on Wednesday. He was taken into custody for a check on possible other violations. The authorities here say that they did not know who that they had into custody until the composite drawings were released by the FBI late or early yesterday. And once they saw those, they felt that they possibly had a match on McVeigh. He was described as John Doe #1 by the FBI. That would be the person with the crew cut. As we understand it, he is inside the Noble County Courthouse, Noble being the, Perry being the county seat of Noble County. We've got quite a scene out here, several hundred people from Perry coming out to get a glimpse of Tim McVeigh. We were attempting to talk with the police chief here, Police Chief Fred LaValle. He came out a minute ago and said he was not in a position to make a comment. As we understand it, McVeigh will be brought out of the courthouse, put into a car, and transported to an awaiting federal helicopter about 6 miles away, and then transported to Oklahoma City, where he will be arraigned by federal authorities. He again was arrested on Wednesday, shortly after the bombing, as we were told, again, presumably for speeding, and then a check on possible other violations. A couple of hundred people out here anxious to see what this person looks like and see what's going on. Back to you.
Greg, can you provide any further details? We heard from Janet Reno that he was arrested about an hour and a half after the bombing incident. You mentioned that you're about 60 miles or so north of Oklahoma City, and she said he was in possession of a firearm. Do you have any further details on any of these things?
That is one of the things we were told that brought him into custody initially. Obviously, if he was simply stopped on a speeding charge, he would have been given a citation and let go. As we understand it, there was a possible firearm in his car, and that's why he was brought to Perry to be further investigated. And then when the composite drawings were released by the FBI, the people here decided that they thought they might have a match.
Okay, Greg Lamont, thanks very much. We'll be back to you. And we will continue our coverage of these dramatic developments and these fast-breaking events after this break.
This is a Nightline Friday night special.
All right, they're going into the house. They are walking into the house.
The pursuit. The arrest. The two suspects now in hand, believed to have ties to a militia.
I've been over there, I've watched them make bombs, you know, small stuff. I mean, nothing that would do any devastation like this.
They're kind of in the mindset that there's an act of war against the people. And in an act of war, all is fair.
Tonight, the bombing in Oklahoma. The fear that investigators have uncovered just the tip of the iceberg.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
The story becomes even more unsettling and disturbing with each passing day. The suggestion these past couple of days that some alien terrorist group might be responsible didn't diminish the horror in Oklahoma City, but today's developments pointing toward homegrown terrorists makes it seem in some ways even worse. You will hear a little later in this program from a couple of men in Decker, Michigan. They are neighbors of the 3 men who are now being questioned in connection with the bombing. What they told me earlier this evening, having to do with experiments in bomb making and a passionate anger against the federal government for its actions against the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas 2 years back, is circumstantial but telling. You will also hear from the commander of a group calling itself the Michigan Militia. He makes clear that such grievances about Waco are widely held. But as I say, we'll come to all of that a little later. To begin with, Chris Bury in Oklahoma City brings us up to date on this day's developments.
As night fell, 68 was the confirmed death toll. Another 4 bodies were discovered tonight in a building across the street from the Federal Building by rescuers using tiny television cameras. The winds here are picking up tonight, and safety is a real concern for rescue workers. On this day, the only comfort was the welcome news that the FBI had apparently cracked the case. This morning, their hope for finding the living all but gone, rescue teams turned their attention to removing the dead, including more children still entombed in the wreckage. The daycare director asked parents to bring in birth certificates with footprints to help in the identification.
I'm lost for words. I don't have any information for anybody, any names or anything. I just want everyone to be fully aware that everybody is doing everything within their power and their ability to get any of these loved ones found.
Keith Coverdale's 2 sons were dropped off at daycare Wednesday morning.
I'm a realist. I'm always going to hold some sort of hope until I see my kids or else hear it from the medical examiner. But in all reality, there's very slim chance that my kids are still, that they lived through that blast.
Melvin Howell's wife was a teacher in that daycare center. This morning, he got word her body had been found.
I just wanted them to find her, you know.
You just wanted to know?
Yeah, if she was dead or alive. That was the biggest suffering I had, it's didn't know her, not knowing.
To signal they shared in the grief, morning commuters turned on their headlights. In Washington, President Clinton, announcing plans to attend a Sunday memorial service in Oklahoma City, had a special word for the children.
My message to the children is that this was an evil thing, and the people who did it were terribly, horribly wrong. We will catch them and we will punish them.
I was kind of scared because I thought he was going to come closer to my neighborhood and do the same thing.
At the Nichols Elementary School in Oklahoma City, children were making cards and sending messages for the rescue workers.
You're doing very well helping patients get well. My heart is pounding with joy. Love, Brittany.
By mid-morning, as forensic teams scoured Oklahoma City streets for the tiniest shreds of evidence, the FBI agent in charge sounded a newly optimistic note.
We are very, very confident that we're going to move rapidly forward with the progress of this investigation and hopefully move to a successful conclusion.
At the scene of the crime, where crews dismantled the Federal Building brick by brick, the pace was painstakingly slow. But the investigation was breaking fast. By midday, the first of several stunning developments.
One suspect, according to our sources, is in custody now. And we can also give you a bit of a hint now as to where the government appears to be focusing its investigation on some of the what are called right-wing white supremacist groups in various parts of the country.
That suspect, 27-year-old Tim McVeigh, the crew-cut John Doe #1 in the FBI sketch, had been stopped for speeding in this Mercury Marquis 60 miles north of Oklahoma City about 90 minutes after the bombing. State police took him into custody in nearby Perry, Oklahoma. As ABC's John McCarthy reports, McVeigh almost got away.
Normally, he would have been out in 24 hours. And it was not until this morning that the FBI happened to ask local authorities in Perry, Oklahoma, who is this man who you are holding, that local officials finally realized who they had, John Doe #1.
This small town has been transformed into the center of the nation's largest criminal investigation.
Just as the media descended on the Noble County Courthouse in Perry, Oklahoma, federal agents began swarming around a farmhouse in Decker, Michigan, the home of James Nichols, a former member of an extremist paramilitary group known as the Michigan Militia.
All right, they're going into the house. They are walking into the house.
Squeeze the triggers. Don't pull the trigger or jerk it. Squeeze the triggers.
The rifle-toting militia, whose members train in camouflage fatigues, share an opposition to gun control and a disdain for the federal government.
When our own Army and Navy decides to stand against the Constitution of the United States of America, we'll call on a higher court.
The Michigan militia was formed last April. Like similar groups across the country, it grew partly as a response to the federal raid at Waco, Texas.
The Michigan militia, like militias throughout the country, have a central tenet. They feel like the federal government is overzealous and out of control and is overreaching and is trampling the rights of citizenry, and that only an armed citizenry can keep the national authority in check.
In Washington, Attorney General Janet Reno confirmed the arrest of Timothy McVeigh, the John Doe #1. Reno hinted at a wider conspiracy.
I remind everyone that John Doe #2 remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. There is a strong likelihood that other persons are involved in this tragedy as well.
The man originally identified as John Doe #2, Terry Nichols, surrendered this afternoon in Harrington, Kansas. The Justice Department now describes him as a potential witness. Late today at the White House, President Clinton underscored the Attorney General's assertion U.S. officials would seek the ultimate punishment.
As I said on Wednesday, justice for these killers will be certain, swift, and severe. We will find them, we will convict them, and we will seek the death penalty for them.
Tonight in Perry, Oklahoma, suspect Tim McVeigh, among the most wanted men in American history, was escorted from the courthouse. Agents led McVeigh to a waiting car and a convoy to a local airport for a short helicopter ride to Tinker Air Force Base near Oklahoma City. As McVeigh was being moved, his father was taken in for questioning in Buffalo, New York. Tonight at Tinker Air Force Base, McVeigh was arraigned on a charge of malicious damage to federal property and taken away in a convoy of flashing lights to the El Reno Correctional Center, just a few miles from the building that stands as a tomb for some of those he may be accused of killing in one of this country's most terrible crimes. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Oklahoma City.
There is no question about the identity of the man the FBI has been calling John Doe #1. He is, as you have heard, Tim McVeigh, and he has been formally charged. What is not so clear is the identity of the man known as John Doe #2. Tim McVeigh has given as his place of residence a farm in Decker, Michigan, belonging to two brothers, James and Terry Nichols. Both of them are being questioned by authorities tonight, although James Nichols, we have just learned, has now been released. But those who know both those men say that neither one of them looks anything like the sketch of the man identified as John Doe #2. If and when we learn any more to clarify the issue, we'll let you know. A short time ago, we spoke to Mark Gibson, the district attorney handling the McVeigh case in Perry, Oklahoma. He told us the story of how Tim McVeigh was first captured and came very near to being released. Mr. Gibson, as I understand the story, you were about 1/2 an hour away from being a very embarrassed assistant district attorney indeed.
Well, I wouldn't say embarrassed, Mr. Koppel, but we all got very fortunate.
What happened?
We were prepared to have a bond hearing for Mr. McVeigh this morning about 9:30 a.m., and at that time I was finishing up another hearing before that, and as we were finishing up the last hearing prior to Mr. McVeigh, the sheriff received word from the federal officials that they wanted to hold Mr. McVeigh, that he was the suspect in the bombing.
When you say you were going to hold a bond hearing, if he'd been able to come up with, what was it, a $5,000 bond, he would have walked?
Yes, sir. In fact, if he had come up with $500 in cash, he would have made bond today.
Is there any reason to believe that he had the money or was likely to get the money?
Yes, he told the judge that he had $2,000 in cash. Now, I can't verify that myself, but that's what he said.
Why was it that he was taken into custody in the first place? Can you just explain how that happened?
Yes, sir. Trooper Hanger stopped him for not having a tag on the car he was driving, and at the time of approaching Mr. McVeigh in the car, then he discovered a loaded Glock 9mm in a shoulder holster. And so Mr. McVeigh was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon in a car.
And when was that?
That was at 10:20 a.m. on Wednesday morning, which was just 75 minutes after the bombing.
So, in effect, you have had this man in your jail since just a couple of hours after the bombing.
That's correct.
The country has been plastered with pictures of McVeigh, and I don't want to make this sound as though I'm badgering you, because I don't think I could identify anyone from one of those pictures either. But as you look at that, handbill now, and you look at Mr. McVeigh, is there a similarity?
Yes, there is a similarity. I had not actually seen Mr. McVeigh yet at the time that we were notified that he was their suspect. Trooper Hanger and I discussed it afterwards, the arresting officer, and we both agreed that although he looked similar to that, neither one of us would have picked him out and said, yeah, that's the man they're looking for.
Now, had he been cross-examined in any way? Had anyone talked to him?
I visited with him briefly before the bond hearing, and then he visited with the judge a little bit, but that was primarily about where he lived and what he did and where he was going, that sort of thing.
And what kind of an impression did he make on you?
Very calm. In fact, that's the same impression that the trooper had of him when he arrested him. He was not nervous. He was not upset about being arrested or about being charged. He said he had never been arrested for anything before, but very militaristic. Everything was yes, sir, no, sir, speak when spoken to, and standing erect. Very polite, very relatively soft-spoken.
Again, and I just want to ask you one more time, as everyone in the jailhouse now thinks about what happened, I mean, here the whole country is looking for this person, and the picture has been distributed about as widely as a picture can be distributed. How does that sort of thing happen?
Well, I just think that, as I said, even now, having seen again the picture and Mr. McVeigh, I would not necessarily think I'm going to pick up the phone and call somebody. I think that's the guy they're looking for. There is a similarity, but certainly not an incredible likeness. And it's just fate and pure luck that we did, in fact, hold him long enough that the federal officials were able to determine they wanted him.
Mr. Gibson, I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Koppel.